Good evening. Glad to see everybody here again this evening. Another Wednesday, and so we have a midweek reflection prepared for you. Before I get to that, just a quick announcement, something we're going to try to put together here for next week. For Tuesday, September 1st, we got 3 public school districts in our area that are opening to students, and there's many private parochial and college level schools that are opening or have opened already as well. And there's going to be a lot of challenges, much more than a normal school year would bring up. And so we want to pray for the leadership, for the students, for the faculty and staff. And so join us in our south parking lot at our church. From somewhere between 7 and 9 a.m. Come and go as you please, but we just want to take a few moments and pray for the new school years and all that's kind of before everybody. I think I left out parents in that list before as well, and certainly need to pray for the families themselves too. And so come, if you have your morning coffee, bring it with you. We're going to provide individually packaged little muffin or something like that, and keep our social distancing and everything. But just a time to kind of be, can't be in the sanctuary, so close we can, and just to pray for the new school year. So that'll be coming up here again Tuesday, September 1st, between 7 and 9 that morning. If you can't make it, please remember, certainly in your prayers, the beginning of the school year there. So this week for our midweek reflection, we're going to continue, as I mentioned before and as we talked about last couple weeks, the book by Pastor Scott Sauls called A Gentle Answer. And I think it speaks to us a lot during our current year, a lot that's going on. And again, this deals with a lot of the polarization that we see in our world, the us versus them, and how as we as Christians can act a little differently. And so we continue on, and the 3rd chapter of this book, he talks about how Jesus disarms the cynic in us. So before we get to a little bit about our scripture here today, I'll tell you a story about one of the first churches I served early in my career, and I'd been there a couple years, and we're getting set for our confirmation class. And this was going to be my first confirmation class with this particular church. And that was going to be 8th graders, maybe a couple 7th graders tossed in. It wasn't a very big congregation, and it ended up being a lot more than that. We had folks from 7th grade all the way up to sophomores in high school. It was a real small community, real small town, so everybody knew everybody, and so everybody got along. The age difference wasn't too big. But some of the kids that came, there was siblings, 3 siblings, I believe, that came, and their family was a part of the church, but folks were shocked when the mom brought them to church that Wednesday evening. At this particular place, Wednesday was a big night for us, and so a lot of folks saw her come in, and I had a lot of comments afterwards. Folks were very surprised that she showed up at church. She hadn't been in church for a long time. They were excited she was there, but she was surprised, and you see some of her background being raised up. Her dad was seen as this very pious figure, this religious man, this leader in the church, but at home she witnessed something completely different. And so there's this great disconnect. And from what I understand at the time, the church focused a little bit more on kind of the hellfire and brimstone preaching. They were more about pointing out what you've done wrong, and they were very short on grace and love. And so she was what you might call a cynic. She wasn't really a believer. I don't know where she was at after I left there. She was a wonderful woman, though, and raised some great kids. And so that was one of the first times I had personally run into that sort of a situation. Pastor Scott Sauls, who's written this book, he has an atheist friend of his, and one day he asked why this friend of his was so hostile toward the idea of God, and especially toward God and Christianity. And his friend's response was this: "If I'm being honest, my issues with Jesus aren't intellectual. I'm actually of the belief that it takes more faith not to be a believer in God than it does to believe in Him. My real problem is that Jesus is a forgiving man. And if I follow Jesus, it means I will have to become a forgiving man also. And I simply can't imagine the horrific pain it would cause me to have to forgive my father for the things that he did to me." I kind of botched that up in the middle there a little bit. Let me try to read that one sentence again. I'm actually of the belief that it takes more faith not to be a believer in God than it does to believe in him. And so here is this man who knew the story of Jesus and had heard about the faith, but was really struggling and wasn't sure that he could do it, wasn't sure what Jesus was up to with all this forgiveness and whether or not he could live it. So we see cynics come at it for different ways. We see one in Scripture, and it turns out to be one of Jesus' disciples early on, a disciple by the name of Nathanael. He begins his relationship with Jesus on very rocky ground, but eventually, as I just said, he's going to be one of the disciples, and he actually gives up his life as a martyr for the gospel of Jesus Christ. We hear the beginning of his story in John chapter 1, the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. And then we read this. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. So when Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." There's the end of our scripture. Folks, we see Nathanael very quickly distancing himself from Jesus, and he's a cynic. He's not sure if he's going to believe in this Jesus. Pastor Sauls, he gives us three reasons why Nathanael distances himself from Jesus. First is for social reasons, and that great question: can anything good come from Nazareth? Nazareth was seen as an irrelevant hick town. Someone powerful wouldn't come from there. He's the one that Moses wrote about, that the prophets talked about, that the one who's going to come and save us. No, that can't be. This can't be. This is not the place where those type of people come from. Folks, we know that God works differently, don't we? And as did Jesus from the scribes and the Pharisees, who were used to telling people how wrong they were and how they were falling short. They wouldn't have believed either that Jesus could be from Nazareth and Jesus could believe who he was. So Nathanael's not too sure of this Jesus because he comes from Nazareth. It's for social reasons. Then it's for political reasons. Like most others, he thought that the Messiah was going to be this absolute ruler, this great military leader to overthrow the Roman government. Not a gentle man, not a peaceful man. And finally, personal reasons. Jesus told Nathanael in verse 47 that he was an Israelite without deceit. All of a sudden, Jesus is getting pretty close and personal, and sometimes that kind of things hit a little too close to home, and we want to take a step back. We're not prepared to embrace whatever this is before us. And so Nathanael wasn't too sure of this Jesus. How does he know me? But Nathanael, he quickly changes his mind. Verse 48, Jesus says that he saw him under the fig tree again. "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael then calls him a rabbi because of this statement. Jesus sees him under the fig tree. Nathanael calls him a rabbi, and this is a term of respect. This is something that's Nathanael is looking up to Jesus, puts him in a high echelon of folks. And then he goes one step further in verse 49 and he calls Jesus the Son of God. How does this happen? How does this work? Jesus, I think he sees the best in us and the worst in us, and he loves us just the same. Nathanael was abrasive. I think back to Jacob in the Old Testament. His name means liar. Both are redeemed by God, though. In Cormac McCarthy's novel, No Country for Old Men, the aging and the fatigued and retired sheriff says to his uncle, says this, and I quote, "I always thought when I got older God would sort of come into my life in some way. He didn't. I don't blame him. If I was him, I would have the same question that he does. Well, the sheriff wasn't quite right about God. You see, God delights in grace towards his children. Nathaniel was a cynic. Jacob had his struggles. Didn't help that his name already meant liar. But in the end, both were redeemed. Both were used for great things. Jesus might see the worst in us. Now, the question still remains, what did Jesus see in Nathaniel or about Nathaniel when he was under that fig tree? We don't know, though. We don't know about this. Scripture is silent. And so it could have been the worst in Nathaniel. Jesus could have been saying, Nathaniel, I saw what you were doing. I saw how you treated this person. I saw how you were acting. Nathaniel responds, though, because Jesus doesn't scold like other religious teachers, other religious leaders of the day. Jesus responds in a different way. So maybe it's possible that it was something good, but it's also possible it was something bad. Regardless, Jesus reaches out to Nathaniel, shows Nathaniel grace. Jesus isn't defensive when it comes to the cynics. He loves on them and lets them know there's a place for them. The folks at the church I was serving when the woman walked in with her kids weren't up in arms, nor did they question her. They were so happy she was there. Pastor Sauls has this great relationship with his atheist friend, even though they don't see eye to eye. Again, we see grace extended. Jesus let Nathaniel know that his cynicism was forgiven. He then tells Nathaniel something in verse 50 that's still true for us today. At the end of verse 50, we hear Jesus say, "You will see greater things than that." Greater things are in store for all who are open to and receive God's grace, and for those who show the grace of God to others. What are these greater things? Well, for us today, there's probably many examples, but thinking about the social climate in which we live in, for us today, it may include pursuing understanding and reconciliation, justice, peace, and friendship with people from another race or culture or political persuasion, economic group or generation whom we wouldn't normally get along with. Maybe these are the greater things that are being talked about, and this is one way in which we can show grace and understanding to somebody else. Pastor Sauls, he ends this chapter by talking about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and remembering his words, and I quote Dr. King, "Returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." Folks, when our cynicism levels are lowered, whether it's religion, politics, justice issues, whatever they might be, we can be a better, loving neighbor. We might have that chance to be able to show the grace of God to somebody else. This can be a pretty big challenge. Folks can wear on us, but when we place our faith in God through Jesus Christ, there's no telling what we can do. Folks, I hope that you have a great rest of your week. I look forward to seeing everybody Sunday morning at 9 a.m. And don't forget to put on your calendars for Tuesday, September 1st, to come and pray as the school year begins. And we'll be in prayer for those. And again, you can come and go as you please. You don't have to stay for the full 2 hours, but just a chance to focus in and pray for the school year, for administration and staff, teachers, the students, the parents, all that. So, folks, hope you're doing all right, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.